The 10 most astonishing revelations about Gog and Magog. Today, we will delve into the depths of history and mythology to unveil the 10 most astonishing revelations about Gog and Magog. Prepare yourself for a journey that will take you to the edges of our reality, where ancient truths and shocking revelations will forever change your perception of the world. Number 10. A call to vigilance. This concept is based on the idea that, in the face of struggles and conflicts symbolized by Gog and Magog, believers must stand firm in their faith, attentive to the signs of the times, and ready to face trials with hope and trust in God's final victory. This teaching urges the Christian community to live in a constant state of alertness, not only to physical or moral threats but also in a spiritual sense, strengthening their relationship with God and their commitment to the principles of the gospel. It is a reminder that vigilance is an essential virtue in Christian life, preparing the faithful for the return of Jesus and the establishment of his kingdom of justice and peace. Number 9. Influence on popular culture. The influence of Gog and Magog in popular culture is vast and varied, permeating through different forms of art and entertainment, demonstrating their enduring impact on the collective imagination. In literature, Gog and Magog have been mentioned in various works, from medieval epic poetry to modern novels. For example, in The Matter of Britain, a collection of Arthurian legends, Gog and Magog are presented as menacing giants. In contemporary literature, authors have used the figures of Gog and Magog to symbolize the clash between opposing forces, often incorporating elements of fantasy and prophecy into their narratives. Artists throughout history have depicted Gog and Magog in paintings, engravings, and sculptures, often in religious or apocalyptic contexts. These artistic works range from traditional representations in churches and cathedrals to modern interpretations exploring the symbolism and cultural impact of these characters. The presence of Gog and Magog in popular culture not only demonstrates their importance as religious and mythological symbols but also their ability to inspire reflection and debate on universal themes such as good versus evil, the fate of humanity, and the nature of redemption. Number 8. The role of Russia. The idea of linking Russia with Gog, and, by extension, Magog, has its roots in the interpretation of ancient texts and the geographical location mentioned in the Bible. Experts and theologians have sought correlations between the biblical descriptions and known nations, placing Magog in regions that today could correspond to northern Eurasia, near what we know as Russia. In Christian eschatology, the identification of modern nations within biblical prophecies is a topic of considerable interest. Some interpret the mention of the Prince of Rosh in the Bible to refer directly to Russia, arguing that Rosh is an ancient reference to this territory. The idea of Russia as Gog has been reinforced in the minds of some by its role in contemporary conflicts, especially those related to Israel and the Middle East. Russia's position on the global geopolitical board and its involvement in regional alliances and confrontations fuel this interpretation. For those who hold this view, Russia, as a world power that often finds itself in opposition to the West and specifically to Israeli interests, symbolizes the type of entity against which the people of God are prophesied to have to fight in the end times. Number 7. Diverse interpretations. Some interpret Gog and Magog purely symbolically, as representations of evil and opposition to God in a general sense, without associating them with specific people or places. Others, however, seek concrete geographical and political identifications, trying to link these figures with specific nations or groups in history. Over the centuries, various scholars have attempted to relate Gog and Magog to historical events and entities. For example, during the Cold War, some saw the Soviet Union as the incarnation of Gog, interpreting the prophecy as a prediction of global conflicts involving this superpower. Not only in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are figures similar to Gog and Magog discussed, but parallels can also be found in legends and mythologies of other cultures, suggesting a universal archetype of the enemy or chaos that must be overcome to restore order. The way the role of Gog and Magog in the end-time scenario is interpreted varies significantly. Some interpretations suggest their appearance will be one of the definitive signs of the apocalypse, while others suggest they represent humanity's ongoing spiritual and moral struggles. Number 6. Echoes in other traditions. In Islam, Gog and Magog are known as Ya'juj and Ma'juj. These creatures appear in the Quran, specifically in the surahs Al-Kahf and Al-Anbiya, where they are described as tumultuous tribes that cause destruction and corruption on the earth. Islamic tradition holds that Dhul Qarnayn, a just and powerful ruler, built a massive barrier to protect the pious communities from their havoc. It is believed that in the last days, this barrier will be destroyed, releasing Ya'juj and Ma'juj and signaling the approach of the Day of Judgment. The Islamic narrative emphasizes the trial and tribulation these creatures represent for humanity, as well as the necessity of faith and reliance on God to overcome adversity. Jewish tradition also mentions Gog and Magog, primarily in the context of the Book of Ezekiel, where Gog is the prince of Magog and leads a coalition of nations in an apocalyptic battle against Israel. This confrontation is often interpreted as a metaphor for the ultimate struggle between good and evil. Furthermore, in Jewish apocalyptic literature, such as the Book of Jubilees, these narratives are expanded, offering various interpretations on the roles and meanings of these figures in the end times. Beyond Islam and Judaism, the legend of Gog and Magog has found its way into various other cultures, often with variations that reflect local concerns and hopes. For example, in some medieval European traditions, Gog and Magog were associated with legendary giants or barbarian peoples who threatened the boundaries of the known world. In medieval geography and literature, they were often placed at the peripheries of the inhabited world, symbolizing the limits and unknown dangers beyond civilization. Number 5. An uncertain location. In the Bible, Gog is described as the leader of Magog, but the references are symbolic and open to multiple interpretations. Ezekiel mentions them in the context of a coalition of nations that will rise against Israel in the end times. However, no precise details about their location are provided, leading to a wide range of speculations. In antiquity, some accounts associated Magog with the Scythians, a group of nomadic peoples from the Eurasian steppes. This association is based on similarities in their ways of life and war practices. Throughout history, various locations have been suggested for Magog, including Northern Asia, the Caucasus, Eastern Europe, and specific regions like Turkey. These theories are based on interpretations of ancient texts, ethnographic correlations, and analysis of names. Number 4. The Millennial Confinement. This episode is detailed in the Book of Revelation, chapter 20, verses 1 to 3, where an angel descends from heaven with the key to the abyss and a great chain. He captures the dragon, the ancient serpent, who is the devil or Satan, and chains him for 1,000 years. This symbolic act marks the beginning of the millennium, a period of peace and justice under the reign of Christ, free from Satan's influence. Interpretations of the millennial confinement vary considerably within Christian theology, mainly divided into 3 schools of thought. This view holds that Christ will return before the millennium, establishing an earthly kingdom of peace and justice. Followers of this interpretation see the confinement of Gog and Magog as a literal event that will precede a millennium of physical peace on earth. Amillennialists interpret the millennium symbolically, considering it as the current period from Christ's first coming to his return. For them, Satan's confinement represents his defeat on the cross and his inability to prevent the spread of the gospel. This perspective suggests that the world will experience a period of Christianization or moral and spiritual improvement that will culminate in the millennium, after which Christ will return. The confinement of Gog and Magog symbolizes the limitations imposed on evil during this time of spiritual prosperity. Number 3. Profound symbolism. At the heart of the symbolism of Gog and Magog lies the duality between good and evil, a universal theme in many religious and philosophical traditions. They represent not only physical enemies but also the temptations, trials, and spiritual adversities that each believer must overcome. This duality reflects the internal and external struggle between light and darkness, divine order versus chaos. Gog and Magog also serve as a mirror of society's destructive inclinations. In various interpretations, it is suggested that their appearance and the conflict they generate symbolize how vices and corruption can lead civilization to the brink of self-destruction. In this sense, the prophecy acts as a warning against the loss of spiritual and moral values. The narrative of Gog and Magog encapsulates the idea of historical cycles of fall and redemption. The Millennial Confinement and their eventual release for the final battle against divine forces can be interpreted as the eternal cycle of challenges faced by believers, followed by renewal and the hope of salvation. This cycle underscores the belief in redemption and the promise of a future restored under God's grace. Number 2. Mysterious origin. The origin of Gog and Magog in biblical scriptures is a topic shrouded in mystery and speculation, leading to numerous interpretations and debates over the centuries. This enigma is primarily centered around two books of the Bible: Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, and Revelation, chapter 20. In the book of Ezekiel, Gog is described as the prince of Magog, who will lead a vast coalition of nations against Israel in the last days. The description is rich in detail but scarce in specific historical context, leading to varied interpretations of who or what Gog and Magog represent. Although some nations are named, the exact location of Magog and the identity of Gog have remained a mystery. Revelation expands the mystery by describing Gog and Magog not as individuals or leaders but as nations or peoples rising against God at the end of Christ's 1,000-year reign on earth. This reference places Gog and Magog in an eschatological context, symbolizing the final forces of evil in the ultimate battle between good and evil. Some scholars have attempted to identify Gog and Magog with known nations and peoples of antiquity, such as the Scythians, Persians, or even tribes from northern Europe. However, no theory has achieved consensus due to the lack of conclusive evidence. Another interpretation suggests that Gog and Magog represent evil in a more abstract or symbolic sense, personifying the spiritual forces opposed to God and His chosen people. In addition to Christianity, Gog and Magog also appear in Islamic and Jewish traditions, where they are associated with similar apocalyptic and eschatological concepts. This convergence has fostered an interfaith dialogue on the end times and the role of the forces of evil. Number 1. The final conflict. This battle is not just a catastrophic event. It marks the end of an era and the beginning of another, filled with hope and divine renewal. Ezekiel chapters 38 to 39. Here, Gog is described as the leader of Magog, along with a coalition of nations, rising in a final assault against the people of Israel. This episode symbolizes the climax of human opposition against God and His chosen people. However, what is remarkable is the divine promise of intervention, where God not only protects Israel but also manifests His glory and supreme power to all nations. Revelation chapter 20. In this passage, Gog and Magog represent nations from all corners of the earth, gathered by Satan to surround and attack the saints and the beloved city, commonly interpreted as the heavenly or spiritual Jerusalem. The definitive defeat of these forces by fire from heaven symbolizes God's final victory, the final judgment, and the establishment of a new heaven and a new earth. This final conflict underscores central themes of divine judgment and redemption. Through this great battle, God not only judges the oppressors but also redeems and restores His people, paving the way for an era of perfect peace and justice. The inevitability of this conflict and the promise of divine victory highlight God's sovereignty over history and the ultimate destiny of the world. It demonstrates that, regardless of the apparent power of evil, God's will prevails. Though centered on Israel, the narrative of Gog and Magog carries a universal message about the triumph of good over evil, the importance of faith, and the necessity of alignment with divine purposes. Throughout history, numerous scholars and theologians have speculated about the actual identity and nature of Gog and Magog, proposing everything from specific nations to symbolic representations of spiritual forces of evil. The final conflict, at its core, is a tale of hope, showing that, despite trials and tribulations, faith and perseverance in good lead to the ultimate victory and the promise of eternal renewal under God's sovereignty.